My name is Tommy Winters, 34 years old, and Senior Project Director at Global Tech Innovations. That Tuesday morning at the Alpine Conference Center felt electric as I prepared to finalize the $4.1 billion deal I had cultivated for 6 years. 11 CEOs from across the industry sat around the mahogany table, trust in their eyes that I had carefully earned. When my boss, Marcus, slipped into the back of the room, I barely noticed, focused on the milestone about to transform our company. I had no idea my career would implode in the next 60 minutes. Before I continue this story, drop a comment letting me know where you're watching from, and be sure to subscribe so you don't miss how these powerful executives responded to what happened next. I didn't start my career expecting to coordinate billion-dollar negotiations. After graduating with my MBA from Northwestern, I joined Global Tech Innovations as an entry-level business development coordinator. Back then, the company was barely on the radar in the clean energy sector, but I saw potential in their innovative approach to sustainable technology. The first 2 years were a blur of late nights, endless spreadsheets, and careful relationship building. I moved from coordinator to specialist, then to manager within 36 months. By year 4, I was Director of Strategic Partnerships, responsible for bringing together companies that could amplify each other's strengths. My colleagues often joke that I had a sixth sense for compatible business models. Tommy has this uncanny ability to see the puzzle pieces before anyone else knows we're even building a puzzle. My mentor, Harold, once said at a company gathering. Harold was the senior vice president who had taken a chance on me when I was still green and uncertain. At 62, with silver hair and decades of industry experience, he commanded respect naturally, something I was still learning to do as a woman in an often male-dominated field. The clean energy initiative that would eventually become the $4.1 billion negotiation began as a modest idea in a quarterly strategy meeting. We were discussing partnerships with solar technology companies when I raised my hand. What if we went bigger? I suggested. Not just solar, but a comprehensive approach integrating multiple renewable sources with storage solutions and distribution networks. The room went quiet. It was ambitious, perhaps overly so. But the company president, Diana Wells, leaned forward with interest. Tell me more. That conversation launched 18 months of research outreach and preliminary discussions. I identified 11 key companies whose technologies and market positions could create a truly revolutionary approach to clean energy infrastructure. Each piece was valuable on its own, but together they could transform how energy was produced, stored, and distributed across 3 continents. The 11 CEOs represented a diverse cross-section of the energy innovation landscape. Sarah Bennett from SolarStream Technologies, a brilliant physicist turned entrepreneur who had revolutionized solar panel efficiency. Elijah Parker of GridWorks International, whose smart distribution systems were already being implemented in 7 countries. David Ramirez heading Quantum Storage Solutions with breakthrough battery technology that solved the intermittency problem plaguing renewable energy. Michael Chen from Pacific Rim Energy Ventures, whose financing models had made renewable projects financially viable in developing markets. Each CEO brought something unique and essential to the table, and over those 18 months I built relationships with all of them. I remembered my first meeting with Sarah Bennett. We met at a coffee shop near her headquarters in Austin rather than in a formal office setting. She arrived in jeans and a simple blouse, her curly hair pulled back in a practical ponytail. I don't have time for companies that just want to use our technology as a green checkbox, she said bluntly, before her latte had even cooled enough to sip. So, convince me this is different. For 2 hours, I outlined my vision and answered her increasingly specific technical questions. By the end, she was drawing diagrams on napkins and calling her chief engineer. With Elijah Parker, it took 3 separate meetings and a detailed integration plan before he was willing to consider joining the initiative. His company had been burned by a similar consortium that fell apart after 9 months of planning. Trust isn't given, it's earned, he told me during our 3rd meeting, and so far you're earning it, but I'm still watching carefully. My assistant Riley became indispensable as the project grew. Fresh out of business school herself, she organized the mountain of details that accompanied negotiations of this scale. Schedules, confidentiality agreements, preliminary technical assessments, market analysis reports, all flowed through her capable hands. "You need to go home sometime," I told her one night at 11:30, finding her still at her desk. She looked up from her computer, dark circles under her eyes, but excitement still evident. "Are you kidding? This is like getting a master class in high-stakes business development. I'm not missing a minute." While most of Global Tech supported the initiative, I noticed early tension with my immediate superior, Marcus Blackwell. As Vice President of Business Development, he should have been my strongest ally. Instead, he seemed increasingly uncomfortable with my visibility and the relationships I was building with industry leaders. It started subtly. He began requiring detailed reports on all my meetings, despite Diana giving me considerable autonomy. He inserted himself into email chains with the CEOs, sometimes contradicting approaches we had already agreed upon. In meetings, he would rephrase my ideas as though they were his own innovations. As I've been saying all along, he would begin before outlining a strategy I had presented the previous week. Jennifer Chen, my colleague in the legal department, warned me over lunch 6 months into the project. "Watch your back with Marcus. I've seen how he operates when he feels threatened." Threatened by what I asked, genuinely confused. "This project benefits everyone if it succeeds." Jennifer gave me a look of experienced wisdom. "Success isn't always measured the same way by everyone, Tommy. For some people, personal recognition matters more than company outcomes." I dismissed her concerns at the time. The project was too important, the potential too great to be derailed by office politics. Besides, I believed the results would speak for themselves. As momentum built and the 11 companies began seriously discussing terms, Marcus became increasingly hands-off, which I initially interpreted as trust in my abilities. Harold suggested otherwise. "He's distancing himself in case it fails," he told me during one of our mentoring coffees. "That way, he can claim no responsibility for the failure, but if it succeeds, he'll suddenly have been deeply involved all along." I finished, finally seeing the pattern. Harold nodded. "Just document everything. Keep Diana in the loop directly whenever appropriate." I took his advice, maintaining meticulous records and ensuring the company president remained aware of all significant developments. This careful documentation would later prove crucial. The morning of the summit at Alpine Conference Center, I woke at 5 after a restless night of anticipation. I had prepared for this day for months, rehearsing presentations, reviewing terms, anticipating questions or concerns each CEO might raise. My apartment felt too small to contain the energy vibrating through me. I dressed carefully in a navy blue suit that projected confidence without flash professional, without being severe. As I applied minimal makeup, I gave myself a pep talk in the mirror. "You've earned this moment, Tammy. You know this deal inside and out. These people trust you because you've proven yourself trustworthy." Little did I know how severely that trust would be tested before the day was through. The Alpine Conference Center lived up to its name, nestled among the rolling hills outside the city, with floor-to-ceiling windows offering panoramic views of the landscape. Designed to host high-level corporate events, it combined luxury with functionality. The main conference room featured a massive oval table of polished mahogany ergonomic chairs, state-of-the-art presentation technology, and subtle but perfect lighting. I arrived 2 hours early to oversee the final preparations, bringing Riley with me to manage the logistics. As we arranged the personalized welcome packets at each seat, I felt a surge of pride looking at the embossed folders containing the preliminary memorandums of understanding. "We're really doing this," Riley whispered, as though speaking normally might break the spell of the moment. "Yes, we are," I confirmed, straightening a pen that was already perfectly aligned with its notepad. The catering staff glided efficiently around us, setting up the breakfast buffet and coffee station in the adjoining room. I had carefully selected menu items that would satisfy different preferences while avoiding heavy foods that might induce afternoon sluggishness. Every detail mattered today. "Miss Winters," a voice from the doorway caught my attention. It was the facility coordinator. the first car has arrived. Sarah Bennett was always early to meetings. She entered with the confident stride of someone accustomed to being the smartest person in most rooms, her curly hair now styled in a professional bob, wearing a tailored green suit that complemented her auburn hair. "Tommy," she said, warmly accepting my handshake and adding a brief hug that surprised me. "The big day is finally here." "Thanks to your willingness to take a chance on this vision," I replied. She glanced around the still empty conference room. "Where's your Marcus? I expected him to be front and center today." The question carried a weight I wasn't ready to analyze. "He'll be joining us soon. He had some other matters to attend to this morning." Sarah raised an eyebrow but didn't press further. Within 30 minutes, most of the CEOs had arrived, creating a buzz of conversation around the breakfast buffet. I circulated among them, making introductions where needed, though many had already connected through preliminary discussions I had facilitated over the past year. Elijah Parker cornered me near the coffee station, his tall frame and serious expression commanding attention even in this group of leaders. "My board had some last-minute questions," he said quietly. "Nothing serious, but they wanted reassurance about the intellectual property protections in Section 7. I nodded, understanding. "We anticipated that. There's an addendum in your packet that addresses those specific concerns. Jennifer from our legal team drafted it yesterday." Relief relaxed his features. "This is why we're here, Tommy. You anticipate issues before they become problems." By 9 o'clock, all 11 CEOs were present, engaged in animated conversations about the potential of our collaboration. I noticed alliances already forming, technical discussions bridging across traditional competitor boundaries. This was exactly what I had hoped for, a recognition that together, these companies could achieve something much greater than any could alone. At 9:15, I gently guided everyone to their assigned seats. The energy in the room was palpable anticipation, mixed with the caution typical of people accustomed to protecting their company's interests. "Before we begin," I said, standing at the head of the table, "I want to thank each of you for your presence today. What we're discussing isn't just a business arrangement, but a potential transformation of an entire industry for the better." I began my presentation with an overview of the integrated model we had developed, showing how each company's technology or expertise filled a critical gap in the overall ecosystem. Using the large display screens, I walked through the financial projections, market impact assessments, and implementation timelines we had developed. 45 minutes into my presentation, just as I was addressing the risk mitigation strategies, Marcus slipped into the room. Rather than taking a seat along the wall with other global tech executives, he stood at the back, scrolling through his phone. The slight disruption caught several CEOs' attention, but I maintained my flow. "As you can see from these scenarios, we've stress-tested the model against multiple market conditions, including potential regulatory changes in key regions." Marcus moved from the back, circling around to stand near my position. I felt a prickle of unease, but continued smoothly. "The next section addresses the phased implementation approach that would allow for adjustment as we gather real-world data." "If I may," Marcus suddenly interjected, stepping forward. "I think it's also worth highlighting the governance structure for decision-making during implementation." The interruption was jarring, but not entirely unusual. I nodded professionally. "Absolutely, Marcus. I was going to cover that in the next section, but please feel free." He took the opening to essentially take over that portion of the presentation, explaining the governance structure I had designed as though it were his creation. Several of the CEOs glanced at me with subtle questions in their eyes, having discussed these very structures with me in previous meetings. I maintained my composure, nodding along as though this handoff had been planned. When he finished, I smoothly reclaimed the presentation. "Thank you, Marcus. Building on those governance principles, let's examine how the financial flows would be managed." The remainder of the morning session progressed without further interruption from Marcus, though I noticed him frequently checking his phone and occasionally stepping out for brief periods. Despite these small distractions, the CEOs remained engaged, asking thoughtful questions that showed they were seriously considering the partnership. By noon, we had covered the major structural elements of the deal, and the momentum was clearly positive. As we prepared to break for lunch, David Ramirez from Quantum Storage Solutions spoke up. I think I speak for many of us when I say this framework is more comprehensive and thoughtfully structured than we expected. My technical team had concerns about integration points, but the solutions outlined this morning address most of them. Murmurs of agreement rippled around the table. I caught Riley's eye from her position near the door, and she gave me a subtle thumbs up. The morning had gone well better than I had dared hope. But something about Marcus's behavior left me with a persistent undercurrent of concern. The catering staff had transformed an adjacent sunlit atrium into an elegant lunch space with small tables encouraging conversation among different combinations of attendees. I had specifically requested this arrangement rather than one large table, hoping to foster connections across companies that might not naturally align. I was pleased to see Sarah Bennett and Michael Chen deep in conversation about financing models for residential solar installations in emerging markets. At another table, Elijah Parker was showing something on his tablet to representatives from 3 other companies, gesturing animatedly about what appeared to be system integration points. I circulated among the tables, answering questions and facilitating introductions where useful. The energy remained positive, with technical discussions already moving beyond the framework I had presented into collaborative problem-solving. About 20 minutes into lunch, Sarah Bennett approached me while I was filling my water glass. "Do you have a moment?" she asked, nodding toward a quiet corner. Once we had stepped away from the others, her expression turned serious. "Is everything all right with your leadership team? There seems to be some tension I can't quite place." I maintained a neutral expression. "What makes you ask that?" "Several things. Your VP's late arrival, an immediate attempt to take control. The way he's been watching you rather than engaging with any of us." She paused. "And the fact that Diana Wells isn't here. I expected your company president for a deal of this magnitude." Her perception was sharp. Diana had indeed planned to attend, but had been called away to handle a situation with European regulators. I had informed everyone of this change last week. Diana sends her regrets, as you know. As for Marcus, he has his own approach to these events. I assure you Global Tech is fully aligned on this initiative. Sarah held my gaze a moment longer. "We're here because of the framework you built and the trust you've established, Tommy. Just remember that." Before I could respond, Marcus appeared at my elbow. "Tommy, could I borrow you for a moment? Company matter." I excused myself and followed him to a small side room. As soon as the door closed, his demeanor changed from collegial to critical. "What exactly do you think you're doing?" The question caught me off guard. Following the agenda we agreed upon, the morning session went exactly as planned. He paced the small room. "You're going off script with these side conversations. Everything needs to go through proper channels. Marcus, relationship building is a critical component of this negotiation. These aren't just side conversations. You need to remember protocol. I'm the VP of Business Development. These relationships need to be institutionalized, not personalized around you." There it was, the concern that had been lurking beneath the surface for months. Marcus wasn't worried about the deal failing. He was worried about it succeeding with me as the central architect. "Of course," I said carefully. "This has always been about building institutional relationships, but trust starts with individuals, as you know." He checked his watch. "We're resuming in 15 minutes. Stick to the planned presentation for the afternoon. I'll handle the relationship aspects." As he left, I took a moment to collect myself. This wasn't the first time Marcus had attempted to insert himself between me and my work. 3 months ago, he had taken credit for the innovative financing structure I had developed for the consortium during a board presentation. When challenged by a board member who had previously discussed it with me, he claimed it had been a collaborative effort he had guided. 2 weeks before that, he had insisted on joining a critical call with Sarah Bennett that I had carefully prepared for, only to dominate the conversation with questions that showed he hadn't reviewed any of the technical materials. I pulled out my phone to find a text from Harold, watching from DC. "Diana, tied up but monitoring. You're crushing it. Stay focused." The simple vote of confidence steadied me. I texted back a quick thanks, then rejoined the lunch gathering for the final few minutes. As we reconvened in the main conference room, I noticed a subtle but definite shift. Marcus had moved his seat to the position directly opposite mine at the oval table, placing himself visually as my counterpart rather than my superior or support. Several of the CEOs noticed the change, exchanging glances I couldn't quite interpret. I launched into the afternoon session, focusing on the detailed implementation roadmap. As you'll see in the materials before you, we've outlined a 36-month deployment strategy with clear milestones and accountability metrics. My presentation continued smoothly, but I became increasingly aware of Marcus typing continuously on his laptop, his attention seemingly elsewhere. Occasionally, I caught glimpses of his screen emails to multiple recipients, including some I recognized as members of the executive team. Despite this distraction, the momentum with the CEOs continued building. We worked through potential obstacles and alignment challenges with representatives from different companies, offering solutions and compromises where their technologies or business models intersected. By 3:30, we had addressed all the major structural components of the agreement. The room had the distinctive energy of a group on the verge of commitment, with technical experts from the various companies already exchanging contact information and scheduling follow-up discussions. Before we moved to the formal review of the MOUs, I said, "Are there any outstanding concerns anyone would like to address?" Michael Chen raised his hand. "Just a point of clarification on the revenue-sharing model for developing markets. The formula on page 43 seems to weight market entry costs differently than we discussed last month." I nodded, appreciating his attention to detail. "You're absolutely right. There was an update based on the tax analysis Jennifer's team completed. If you look at Appendix C, you'll see the comparative models with the updated regulatory information that led to that adjustment." He flipped to the appendix, studied it for a moment, then nodded satisfaction. "Perfect. This actually improves the model for early-stage markets. Thank you." With that final concern addressed, I could feel the room ready to move forward. We were minutes away from a formal agreement to proceed with the most significant clean energy collaboration in the industry's history. 6 years of work were about to culminate in a transformative partnership. I made eye contact with Riley, who gave me an encouraging smile. She had witnessed every step of this journey and understood exactly what this moment meant. I took a deep breath and prepared to guide the group through the final step of reviewing the MOUs before signatures. "Let's proceed to the formal documents," I began. "As you'll see, the memorandums of understanding reflect everything we've discussed today, with the specific technical requirements detailed in the appendices relevant to each company's contribution." As I started distributing the final signature packets, I noticed Marcus close his laptop and straighten in his chair. Something in his posture sent a warning signal through me, a tension, an anticipation that hadn't been there before. But I continued, professionally focused on bringing this negotiation to its successful conclusion. The mood in the conference room had reached that unique blend of cautious optimism and excitement that precedes the finalization of a major deal. All 11 CEOs had their signature packets open before them, legal representatives at their sides reviewing the final language. Technical teams from several companies were already exchanging contact information, eager to begin the integration work. I stood at the head of the table, a sense of pride and accomplishment warming my chest as I prepared to guide them through the signature process. As we prepare to formalize our agreement, I began. "I want to acknowledge the vision and commitment each of you has demonstrated in reaching this point. What we're creating together will not only transform our respective companies, but potentially reshape how clean energy is developed and deployed globally." Nods of agreement around the table, a few smiles. Sarah Bennett caught my eye and gave me a subtle thumbs up beneath the table edge. "The signature process will begin with the Master Framework Agreement, followed by the company-specific appendices. Once completed..." Actually, Tommy Marcus's voice cut through the room as he stood up. "Before we proceed, there's a matter I need to address." The interruption created an immediate shift in the room's energy. I paused, professionally maintaining my composure despite the unexpected interruption. Of course, Marcus, the floor is yours. He straightened his tie and swept his gaze around the table, making brief eye contact with each CEO. Global Tech Innovations appreciates the commitment you've all shown to this potential partnership. However effective, immediately there will be an organizational change in our approach. He turned to face me directly. Tammy won't be needed anymore for this initiative. She's being transferred to our Regional Operations Division, effective immediately. The words hit me like a physical blow. Regional Operations was a corporate backwater handling maintenance contracts for legacy systems, a significant demotion, and completely unrelated to the partnership work I had spent years building. For a moment the room was utterly silent. I felt blood rushing to my face, my heartbeat thundering in my ears. The signature packet in my hand suddenly seemed to weigh 100 pounds. This restructuring will streamline our approach. Marcus continued into the silence, his voice falsely casual as though announcing a minor schedule change. I'll be personally overseeing all partnership activities moving forward, with direct reporting to our executive team. This will ensure institutional continuity beyond any individual team member. My mind raced through possibilities. Was this authorized by Diana? Had something happened I wasn't aware of? But the timing was too perfect, the move too calculated to be anything but what it appeared, a public power play designed to push me aside at the moment of success. I became acutely aware of every sensation, the slight tremble in my hands, the tightness in my throat, the eyes of 11 industry leaders and their teams, all fixed on me watching my reaction. Marcus wore an expression of professional concern that didn't reach his eyes, which held something closer to triumph. I had two choices: create a scene that would potentially jeopardize the deal, or maintain my professionalism despite the public humiliation. Years of careful work hung in the balance. Taking a deep breath, I placed my signature packet gently on the table. When I spoke, my voice was steady, betraying none of the turmoil beneath. I understand. Of course, the company's organizational decisions take priority. I turned to address the CEOs directly. It has been my privilege to work with all of you on developing this framework. I wish you every success with the implementation. Marcus nodded, clearly pleased with my acquiescence. Tommy, you can go ahead and hand over your materials to me. We'll take it from here. As I gathered my notes and prepared to surrender my position at the table, a voice broke the uncomfortable silence. Excuse me. It was Elijah Parker from Gridworks, his deep voice carrying natural authority. Is this change something that was planned in advance? Because it seems unusual to replace the key architect of a partnership at the moment of signature. Marcus's smile tightened almost imperceptibly. Global Tech continuously evaluates our team deployments to ensure optimal alignment with company objectives. Tommy has done excellent preliminary work, but as we move to implementation, different skill sets are required. Another voice joined in, Sarah Bennett. With respect, Mr. Blackwell, we've been discussing implementation details with Tommy for months. Her understanding of the integration points between our technologies has been central to the framework. I stood frozen between my seat and the door caught in an excruciating moment of professional limbo. Protocol dictated I should leave immediately after being removed from my position, but the CEOs were directly addressing the situation, making a clean exit impossible. Marcus maintained his corporate smile, though I could see tension building in his jaw. I can assure you all that Global Tech has a complete understanding of the framework. My team has been involved in oversight throughout the development process. David Ramirez, usually the most reserved of the group, spoke next. That's interesting because when my technical team had integration questions last month about our storage protocols interfacing with SolarStream's collection systems, you directed them back to Tommy, saying she was the only one with the complete technical picture. A flush began creeping up Marcus's neck. That was a delegation decision appropriate for that stage of the process. As we moved to formalization, I'm sorry, Michael Chen interrupted, closing his signature packet, but this feels very abrupt. Is Diana Wells aware of this restructuring? We had discussed with her the importance of continuity in leadership for the first implementation phase. Marcus's expression hardened. As Vice President of Business Development, these organizational decisions fall under my authority. Diana is currently engaged with regulatory matters in Europe, as you know. I noticed several of the CEOs exchanging glances. The room had transformed from the brink of celebration to something tense and uncertain in a matter of minutes. Perhaps I suggested quietly, trying to salvage the situation, we should focus on the agreements themselves. The framework is solid regardless of who oversees implementation from Global Tech. My attempt at professional detachment was meant to preserve the deal, even if it meant accepting my unceremonious removal. But Marcus interpreted it as undermining his authority. Actually, Tommy, since you are no longer assigned to this initiative, your presence is not required for the remainder of the meeting. His tone had lost all pretense of collegiality. Please ensure all relevant materials are transferred to my team before you leave the facility. The dismissal was brutally clear. I nodded once, maintaining what dignity I could, and turned toward the door where Riley stood wide-eyed, clutching her tablet. As I took my first steps away from the table, I heard Sarah Bennett's chair scrape back. Hold on. Sarah's voice cut through the tension. I paused mid-step, turning to see her standing arms crossed, her posture radiating authority, despite her petite stature. Before we proceed, I need to understand exactly what's happening here, she continued. Because from where I'm sitting, it appears the person who built the relationships and technical framework that brought us all here is being summarily dismissed at the finish line. Marcus's professional mask slipped for just a moment, revealing irritation before he recomposed his features. Miss Bennett, I understand your concern, but this is an internal Global Tech matter. I can assure you, the transition will be seamless. Elijah Parker stood next, his imposing height adding physical weight to the growing resistance. With respect, Mr. Blackwell, it doesn't feel seamless from our perspective. For the past 18 months, Tammy has been our primary point of contact and the architect of this collaboration. I remained frozen between my former seat and the exit, caught in an excruciatingly public moment that was rapidly spinning beyond anyone's control. Professional training told me to leave quietly, but the CEOs were directly challenging my removal, making departure impossible without seeming to ignore their concerns. I appreciate your confidence in Tommy's contributions, Marcus replied, his tone hardening slightly. But Global Tech has a deep bench of talent. I personally oversaw the development of this framework and am intimately familiar with all aspects of the partnership structure. David Ramirez, who had been quietly observing, suddenly spoke up. That's interesting, because when we had that technical integration challenge between our battery management system and the grid distribution protocols, you referred my team to Tammy, saying, and I quote, "She handles all the technical details while I focus on the strategic vision." A murmur rippled through the room. Marcus's face flushed slightly. A delegation decision appropriate for that stage of development. My mind flashed back to that specific incident. Ramirez's team had identified a critical compatibility issue that could have reduced storage efficiency by 28%. I had spent 3 sleepless nights coordinating with engineers from 4 different companies to develop a workaround, ultimately improving efficiency beyond the original specifications. Marcus had been completely uninvolved, dismissing it as a technical issue beneath his pay grade. Michael Chen, who had been reviewing something on his phone, looked up. I've just checked our correspondence history. In the last 6 months, we have exchanged 76 emails with Tommy addressing specific implementation concerns. With Mr. Blackwell, we have exactly 3, all of which were meeting scheduling confirmations. The systematic dismantling of Marcus's claim to involvement was happening without any effort on my part. Each CEO was spontaneously contributing evidence of my central role based on their own experiences. Additionally, Sarah Bennett added, when my board expressed concerns about intellectual property protections for our proprietary solar conversion technology, it was Tommy who arranged the specialized legal framework with Jennifer Chen that made our participation possible. Where were you during those negotiations, Mr. Blackwell? Marcus's professional demeanor was cracking under the mounting evidence. As vice president, I naturally focus on high-level direction rather than day-to-day details. The integration of 11 separate technological systems, compliance with regulatory frameworks across 3 continents, and creation of a viable financial model aren't day-to-day details, Elijah Parker countered. They're the entire substance of this partnership. I caught Riley's eye from her position near the door. She gave me the slightest nod of encouragement, her expression a mixture of anxiety and pride. The room had transformed into something I never could have anticipated, my professional colleagues spontaneously defending my contribution without any prompting. Marcus tried a different approach. I understand your concerns about continuity. However, as I mentioned, I will be personally taking over all partnership activities, reporting directly to Diana Wells and the executive team. This will actually elevate the initiative's priority within Global Tech. Sarah Bennett raised a skeptical eyebrow. And what happens when the next big opportunity comes along? Will you hand this off to someone else once it's successfully launched? That's a premature question, Marcus deflected. Right now our focus should be on finalizing the agreements before us. Lisa Wong, CEO of Pacific Rim Renewables, who had been silent until now, closed her signature packet deliberately. Actually, I think it's a very pertinent question. My company is potentially committing to a decade-long technological integration. The person who understands how our system interfaces with the other 10 companies is being removed without warning or explanation. That materially changes what we're signing. Marcus's frustration was becoming more visible. Miss Winters is a Global Tech employee. Her assignment is an internal company decision that shouldn't affect your commitment to the partnership. But it does, David Ramirez said firmly. We've worked with Tommy to solve integration challenges specific to our technologies. She holds the comprehensive understanding of how these systems work together. That knowledge isn't instantly transferable. I remained silent throughout this exchange, aware that any defense of my position would seem self-serving and potentially unprofessional. Yet each CEO was independently voicing exactly what I would have explained: the critical role of relationships and technical understanding in a partnership of this complexity. Marcus checked his watch clearly, trying to regain control of the meeting. I appreciate everyone's input, but we have agreements ready for signature. Tammy's reassignment is not open for discussion. Global Tech has made its decision. In that case, Sarah Bennett replied, SolarStream needs to reconsider our position. She turned to her legal counsel. We'll need to review the implications of this leadership change before proceeding. The first fracture had appeared. Marcus's expression flashed with alarm before he composed himself. Miss Bennett, I assure you nothing substantive has changed in the agreement before you. Except the person we've been working with for 18 months who understands the intricate connections between our technologies is being replaced by someone who, by his own admission, hasn't been involved in the technical details. Her tone was polite but unyielding. Marcus looked around the table, suddenly realizing he was losing control of the situation. Perhaps I haven't been clear about my role. As Vice President of Business Development, all partnership activities fall under my division. I've been overseeing this initiative from its inception. This claim, so blatantly false to anyone who had been involved in the project, broke my professional silence. Marcus, I said quietly, that's not accurate. This initiative began in the Strategic Planning Division under Diana's direct supervision before transferring to Partnership Development. You became involved 9 months ago when the financial modeling was already complete. All eyes turned to me. For a moment, the room was silent. Marcus's face darkened. Since you are no longer assigned to this project, your input is neither required nor appropriate, Tommy. Please collect your materials and leave as requested. His tone had abandoned all pretense of collegiality. The tension in the room was palpable. Elijah Parker broke the silence. I believe we all need to take a step back. Gridworks cannot sign these agreements under the current circumstances. We need clarification from Global Tech about the leadership structure for implementation. One by one, other CEOs began voicing similar concerns. The unity of purpose that had characterized the morning session had transformed into a unified hesitation. I stood witnessing the unraveling of years of work torn between professional protocol demanding my departure and the clear desire of the partners for my continued involvement. The moment balanced on a knife's edge with the potential collapse of the entire initiative hanging in the balance. David Ramirez, who had been quietly conferring with his legal counsel, suddenly stood up. The room fell silent as he buttoned his suit jacket, a formal gesture that signaled the seriousness of what he was about to say. After consultation with my team, I regret to inform you that Quantum Storage Solutions must formally withdraw from these negotiations at this time. The statement fell like a bomb in the hushed conference room. Marcus's face paled. Mr. Ramirez, this is a hasty decision based on a routine personnel adjustment. Perhaps if we took a short break. This is not hasty, Ramirez interrupted, his usual diplomatic tone replaced with firm resolve. The integration of our proprietary battery management system with the other technologies requires detailed technical coordination. Miss Winters has been instrumental in solving complex compatibility issues that arose during development. Her unexpected removal from the project materially changes what we're agreeing to. Before Marcus could respond, Sarah Bennett stood as well. Solar Stream Technologies must also withdraw at this time. The intellectual property protections we negotiated were based on specific implementation protocols that Miss Winters helped design. Without her oversight, we cannot be confident those protections will be properly executed. Like dominoes falling in slow motion, Elijah Parker rose next. Gridworks International, similarly, must withdraw pending clarification of the leadership structure and commitment to the technical integration framework as originally developed. One by one, all 11 CEOs stood, each formally stating their company's withdrawal from the negotiations. The carefully constructed partnership was disintegrating before my eyes. Marcus's professional composure had completely evaporated, replaced by barely contained panic. This is a massive overreaction to a standard organizational change. I urge everyone to reconsider. Michael Chen, usually the most diplomatic of the group, responded with unexpected directness. Mr. Blackwell, let me be clear. We came here today, prepared to sign agreements based on relationships and technical frameworks developed primarily by Tammy Winters. Her abrupt removal without transition planning demonstrates either poor management or, he paused significantly, something more concerning about Global Tech's commitment to this partnership. I can assure you, Marcus insisted, Global Tech remains fully committed. Actions speak louder than words, Lisa Wong interjected. And what we're witnessing suggests internal politics have been prioritized over partnership integrity. I remained standing between my former seat and the door, watching 6 years of work crumble in real time. The rational part of my mind recognized I should feel devastated, yet a strange calm had settled over me. These industry leaders were making independent decisions based on their own assessment of the situation, validating everything I had built in the most tangible way possible. Marcus pulled out his phone. I need to call Diana Wells immediately. This misunderstanding can be resolved. That would be appropriate, Elijah Parker agreed. In fact, I believe many of us would appreciate direct clarification from your company president about this sudden change. As Marcus stepped away to make the call, an unexpected wave of supportive glances came my way from around the table. Sarah Bennett walked over to where I stood. I'm sorry about this, I told her quietly. The framework is solid, regardless of who oversees implementation. She shook her head. This isn't about the framework alone. It's about trust and relationship integrity. When someone tries to take credit for another person's work in such a blatant manner, it raises serious questions about organizational ethics. Marcus returned a few minutes later, his expression grim. Diana is still in meetings with European regulators. I've left urgent messages. In that case, David Ramirez announced, I am instructing my legal team to formally withdraw our signed letter of intent and prepare notification that all preliminary agreements are now void. Around the table, other executives nodded, reaching for phones to contact their respective legal departments. Marcus made one final attempt to salvage the situation. This is an extreme reaction that will set clean energy development back by years. Are you really willing to sacrifice industry progress over an internal staffing decision? Sarah Bennett answered for the group. What we're witnessing isn't a staffing decision, Mr. Blackwell. It's a transparent attempt to claim credit for someone else's achievement at the moment of success. That speaks to character and trustworthiness, fundamental qualities in any long-term partnership. The systematic dismantling of the partnership continued with methodical precision. Legal representatives began collecting and marking MOUs as withdrawn. Technical teams who had been excitedly exchanging contact information now sat in awkward silence. Riley approached me discreetly. "Harold is on the phone," she whispered. "He's trying to reach Diana directly through back channels." I nodded acknowledgement but maintained my professional composure. Creating further disruption would only worsen an already disastrous situation. Michael Chen approached Marcus, speaking just loudly enough for nearby executives to hear. "For what it's worth, had you simply acknowledged Tammy's central role and positioned yourself as supporting her leadership of the implementation phase, we would likely be signing agreements right now." Marcus had no response, his expression a mixture of anger and dawning comprehension of the scale of his miscalculation. One by one, the CEOs and their teams began packing up materials. What should have been a celebration of a historic partnership had transformed into a somber departure. Elijah Parker stopped beside me on his way out. "This isn't over, Tammy. The framework you've built is too valuable to abandon. When the dust settles, don't be surprised if you hear from us." Others offered similar quiet encouragements as they filed past. I maintained my professional demeanor, thanking them for their participation without commenting on the situation itself. Within 45 minutes of Marcus's announcement, the conference room had emptied except for the global tech team. The silence was deafening compared to the animated discussions that had filled the space all day. Marcus sat alone at the table staring at his phone, the failed power play having backfired spectacularly. Without a word to me, he began gathering his materials and barking orders at the remaining staff about collecting all documentation. Riley approached me, concern evident in her expression. "What happens now?" I gave her a reassuring smile. "Now we follow protocol. We document everything that occurred and prepare a full report for Diana. But your position is no longer with this initiative, according to the Vice President of Business Development," I replied calmly. "So I'll proceed accordingly." As I gathered my personal items, my phone buzzed with a message from Harold. "Diana boarding flight back now. Complete chaos at HQ. Document everything. This isn't the end." I left the Alpine Conference Center with my head held high, carrying 6 years of work in banker's boxes and my laptop. The partnership had collapsed, but something unexpected had emerged in its place, a clear validation of my value that no corporate power play could erase. The next morning arrived with the surreal quality that follows major life disruptions. I woke early, habit driving me to prepare for work before reality caught up a moment later. Right. I had been publicly removed from my position yesterday in front of 11 industry leaders. What exactly did one wear to clean out one's office after such an event? I opted for simple professionalism, a charcoal pantsuit that had always given me confidence. If nothing else, I would exit with dignity. Arriving at Global Tech headquarters at 7:30, I found the executive floor unusually active for that hour. People hurried between offices, conversations stopping abruptly when they noticed me. I walked directly to my office, ignoring the awkward glances and whispered comments. Riley was already at her desk outside my office, red-eyed but determined. "I've prepared the boxes for your personal items," she said, rising to follow me in. "And I've made copies of all project documentation for Diana's review." "Thank you, Riley," I replied, touched by her loyalty. "But you should maintain some distance. No need for your career to be affected by whatever's happening with mine." She shook her head firmly. "Not a chance. Besides, Harold called this morning. He says to tell you Diana landed at 6 and is heading straight here." I began the methodical process of separating personal items from company property, diplomas and certificates from the wall, family photos from the desk, books I had purchased rather than expensed. It was strange how 6 years of professional life distilled into so few truly personal possessions. At 8:15, a knock at my door revealed Jennifer from legal, her expression a mixture of professional reserve and personal concern. "Tommy, I need to inform you that your company accounts have been restricted pending transition review. Standard procedure for departing executives, though usually reserved for those suspected of misconduct." The implication wasn't subtle. "Understood," I replied evenly. "I've already transferred all current project files to the shared drive." Jennifer glanced over her shoulder before speaking more quietly. "Off the record, Quantum and SolarStream's legal teams have been calling all night. The partnership agreements are formally suspended, not terminated. Thought you should know." Before I could respond, a commotion in the outer office drew our attention. Diana Wells had arrived, still carrying her travel bag, Marcus following behind, attempting to explain something as she marched through the department. "In my office, both of you." Now, Diana's voice carried the unmistakable tone of a leader whose patience had evaporated entirely. For the next 2 hours, I sat in Diana's office, presenting a factual account of what had transpired at Alpine Conference Center. Marcus repeatedly attempted to frame the event as a reasonable transition that had been misinterpreted by the partners, while I simply recounted the sequence of events and statements as they had occurred. Diana listened without interruption, occasionally making notes. When both accounts were complete, she dismissed Marcus and asked me to remain. "I've spent the entire flight back reading emails and taking calls from very upset CEOs," she said once we were alone. "Elijah Parker personally called me to say Gridworks is unwilling to proceed with any version of this partnership that doesn't include you in a leadership role." I maintained professional detachment. The framework is sound regardless of who implements it. With proper transitions, someone else could be— "Stop!" Diana interrupted. "This isn't about the framework anymore. It's about trust." Every single CEO said essentially the same thing. They trusted you, they built relationships with you, and they saw someone trying to take credit for your work at the finish line. That violated something fundamental for them. She rubbed her temples, fatigue from the overnight flight evident. "Marcus has given me his resignation effective immediately." The news should have felt like vindication, but instead, I felt only tiredness. "I'm sorry it came to this. The partnership was too important to derail over internal politics." "Which is exactly why you're the right person to salvage it," Diana replied. "If you're willing, I want you to lead a newly created division focused exclusively on this initiative, reporting directly to me. No more layers of management, no more opportunities for others to insert themselves between your work and recognition for it." The offer was unexpected and substantial. A direct reporting line to the president represented a significant promotion. Yet I hesitated, the public humiliation of the previous day still raw. "I appreciate the offer, Diana, but I need some time to consider whether this is still the right place for me." She nodded understanding. "Fair enough. Take the weekend. But before you make any decisions, you should know there's been an interesting development." She handed me her tablet, displaying an email from Sarah Bennett to all the consortium CEOs copied to Diana. It proposed a modified structure for the partnership with implementation oversight provided by an independent entity rather than any single participating company. The email concluded with, "Such an entity would require leadership with comprehensive understanding of all technical components and establish trust relationships with all partners." "They're creating a position for you," Diana said, stating the obvious. "If you decide not to stay with Global Tech." The realization was overwhelming. These industry leaders had not only stood up for me in the moment, but were now actively creating an alternative path forward. "I need to think," was all I could manage. Diana nodded. "Take the time you need. But whatever you decide, know that what happened yesterday wasn't a failure. It was a powerful demonstration of something too many people forget in business, that relationships built on genuine trust and competence matter more than organizational charts or titles." Over the next few days, the situation evolved rapidly, my phone filled with messages from partners and competitors alike. 3 direct job offers arrived from companies who had heard about the incident through industry channels. Harold called daily with updates from within Global Tech, where Marcus's departure had created a significant reorganization opportunity. The most surprising call came from Elijah Parker and Sarah Bennett, together formally inviting me to discuss leading the independent oversight entity they were establishing for the partnership. "The framework you built is too valuable to abandon," Elijah said, echoing his words from the conference room. "But we need someone we all trust to guide implementation." 1 week after the disastrous meeting at Alpine Conference Center, I sat in a small cafe considering my options. The partnership was reconstituting itself around a new structure, one that actually addressed concerns about dependency on any single company. Global Tech would still participate, though, in a reduced capacity until they rebuilt trust. Diana had made a genuine effort to create a role worthy of my contribution. Yet something had fundamentally changed within me. The public attempt to dismiss my contribution had revealed both my vulnerability within traditional corporate structures and, paradoxically, my true professional value beyond them. The experience had taught me that true professional worth isn't measured by titles or organizational authority, but by the relationships you build and the trust you earn through genuine competence and integrity. When tested, those relationships had proven more durable than corporate hierarchy. 2 weeks later, I launched Winter's Strategic Integration, an independent consultancy specialized in complex multi-company technological partnerships. My first client was the renamed Clean Energy Collaborative, comprising the original 11 companies plus 3 new partners who had been watching the initiative with interest. Global Tech eventually rejoined the collaborative under Diana's direct oversight, though in a more limited role than originally planned. Marcus reportedly took a position with a smaller competitor, though industry whispers suggested he was having difficulty rebuilding his reputation. Riley joined my consultancy as operations director, bringing her organizational brilliance to our growing team. Jennifer from legal eventually followed along with several other Global Tech colleagues who shared our vision of partnership built on competence and trust rather than corporate politics. The $4.1 billion negotiation that imploded so spectacularly that day ultimately resulted in a $5.7 billion implementation that launched 8 months later, restructured to better protect all participants and create more equitable value distribution. The betrayal I experienced that day at Alpine Conference Center could have been the end of my career. Instead, it became the catalyst for something far more valuable: the discovery of my true professional worth and the courage to build something that genuinely reflected my values. If there's one lesson I've learned from this experience, it's this: your value doesn't come from your title or position within a company. It comes from the relationships you build, the trust you earn, and the integrity with which you approach your work. When those are tested, they reveal your true professional worth in ways no corporate hierarchy can measure or diminish. Have you ever experienced someone trying to take credit for your work? How did you handle it? Share your story in the comments below. And if this story resonated with you, please like, subscribe, and share it with someone who might need this reminder of their own professional worth. Remember, your value isn't determined by those who try to diminish you, but by those who recognize what you truly bring to the table.